hang on a minute, you promised me this and amazing results here and all the things I care about in your marketing, and now I've paid you and now you're giving me this.
I'd like to introduce you to Victoria Cruz. She is, much like myself, a business coach and mentor, working with people from all levels of the game.
What you want to deliver is not always what your person wants to buy. Vice versa, what they want to buy is not always what you're interested in delivering.
Where you spoke into sell them what they want, then give them what they need. And I loved the extension of what you put there, because I think my intentionality is everything you spoke to, and I don't know I always communicate that.
If you sell someone what they want and then you give them what they need, those are often two very different things.
And we always say everybody has a seat at the round table, and I know that I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for, my team.
Ultimately, I think the work becomes so much more rewarding, especially when you find your people.
Hello, gorgeous beings. Welcome to today. We are here for another amazing episode of Cosmic Money, the podcast, the strategy and energetics of seven-figure business. So I'm actually really excited for our guest today. Oh, I just gave myself goosebumps. So it must be, if we're already in goosebumps land, it must be, it must be good. I'd like to introduce you to Victoria Cruz. She is, much like myself, a business coach and mentor, working with people from all levels of the game, really, as well. That's 0 to 6 figures. Anybody who's stuck at 6 figures and wants to go multi, and then 7 figures and beyond. Really, helping them have that juicy freedom. Life by design. So, hi, Victoria. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is very exciting.
Oh, I'm glad to have you here. Now, let me give our listeners just a little bit of context. I actually just said something similar to you. Most of our guests, I'm very lucky to call close friends and stuff like that, from my years in business and just general socialness, and so you are somebody who has been floating in my vision for a very long time, and I've heard amazing things, but we've actually not met or even had a conversation, I don't even think, on social media and stuff like that. So yeah, again, hello.
Hello. And isn't that bizarre? It's funny. It's like we've been kind of orbiting around each other, a lot of similar connections, a lot of mutual friends. But yeah, we haven't collided as yet. So this will be good fun.
Yeah, and I said to you a moment ago, because your amazing social media presence and content and being, shows up in front of my eyes on a regular basis, and I find that there are so many likenesses, and as you said as well, certain to be some differences. So that's really exciting for us to be able to unpack today. But yeah, I'm again really excited for this. So what I would love to know, first and foremost, I think, is I don't know enough about your story. I don't know anything, to be honest with you. So I'd love to hear how it is that you ended up, where it is you are now doing all of this.
So it was 2016. My son was 1.5, and I'd gone back to work in the not-for-profit sector. In the early childhood sector, actually, selling early childhood services for a not-for-profit organization across New South Wales. And my office was in a daycare center, and I thought I had it all figured out because I was going to have my baby, take my mat leave, and then I was going to go back to work and bring my son with me. But so much happened during that time when I ended up birthing him at home alone, unplanned. I was with my husband, but unassisted birth. And that was a massive spiritual awakening experience for me. And then he had a near-death experience at 7 days old. In part, potentially, we don't know, because he was born at home unplanned. So there was a lot of trauma there, and massive times, right? Massive healing journey, all the things. Anyway, I came back to work and went, I can't do this. I can't leave my child here, and I can't sell these services anymore. And I had started spending time online during my maternity leave in a lot of the entrepreneurial Facebook groups, and started building connections there, just because I found a lot of the mums groups just weren't really my vibe. And I just didn't feel like I could get an in there or connect with people there. Whereas the entrepreneurial space, I felt like these are my people, because I had always worked in business. And, I had started a couple of other side hustles in the past. I had always worked as a contractor, that sort of thing. And so when I decided to leave, and it was a very kind of, it was an intuitively led choice for me. It wasn't one made on logic or sense or planning. It was, when my son nearly died, I basically bargained with God, as you do, or
Mm.
source or the universe. I was like, if you let me keep him, I'll do whatever you say.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
And so it was like, okay.
So
And
now you have to. Like, yeah.
now,
So now, yeah.
now that you've just signed for a mortgage, resign, right?
Yeah.
So I did, and um, it was full on. It was hardcore. I had 3 days pay in the bank, and that was it. No backup plan, no alternative mapped out. My husband's a singer, which has been lucrative throughout his career, but at that point was not so.
Yeah.
Um, I had a baby that didn't sleep. I had no idea what I was going to sell, even though I had a lot of experience in strategy. I had no experience online. Um,
Mm,
and I had no sleep.
yeah.
So it was a really yeah, it felt like madness really, but I did it anyway. And
Yeah.
now I look back and I'm so grateful to that version of me, and I'm so glad I did it. I started
Yeah.
selling services in Facebook groups, and I started doing written sessions actually. They were intuitively guided at the time. I didn't feel confident to stand behind the strategy piece as being straight strategy. And it also didn't
Mm,
feel right for me, given that I really do attune to the individual. And so I was doing written sessions for like $50 a pop.
yeah.
And I was like, I just need to do enough of these a week in order to
Yeah.
cover my salary. Fast forward a couple of years, and by that time, I'd seen some gaps in video strategy, especially, and I'd created
Yeah.
my course, Connect and Convert on Camera. And then, yeah, and was doing a lot of business coaching as well. So within a couple of years, I hit six figures, and then I diversified and I got a bit restless in the video space only, because what I was doing was video was my shop front. But then when people would come in, I'd be like, okay, so what are we selling and who to and what's the message? And
Yeah.
it's hard to have videos that really convert if you don't have all of your core foundations in place. So
Yeah.
that's what I was actually delivering. And then
It's interesting on that piece. Like, part of my own story, which everybody knows, so it's boring now, but like, is was very similar in a sense of that. My shop front was white labeled content. Like, we were creating programs on behalf of other people that they could then run as themselves, like as if they created it. Look like the badass and whatever. And what I found was, like, in selling those things to them, they didn't know how to business, or they didn't know how to actually then run the program, even though they once, had the content. And it was like that, seeing that gap where it's like, okay, you've got the thing now, but all the pieces aren't really in place, which it sounds like similar to, yeah, what you were finding.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so I was quickly selling video services, but really delivering complete comprehensive business
Yeah.
transformation and up levels. And sometimes that would even look like completely repositioning their business, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
your best fit client? Is that your dream client? Is that really what it's about for you? And we would do that work. And they would come out with, sure, high conversion videos, but for a completely different business. And, one they loved a lot more, one that made more money more easily, one that was more them. And your uninhibited purpose led expression is a phrase that I would say forever, every day, for years. It really was a core mission of mine in the beginning. And I found that that expression piece was very difficult if they were only speaking about and selling what they felt they had to speak about and sell in order to make money, when it wasn't really congruent with them. So that was
Mm,
my initial interest. And
yeah.
then that got really easy. And I think with my neurodivergent brain, always looking for a massive learning curve or a challenge to chew
Yeah.
on, I
Mm.
then got really passionate about repositioning, high ticket packaging, positioning, and sales, and bringing, I guess, some deep ethics to that space, which was a bit shady for a while there across the collective. And that was really fun and exciting too. And that's when I started to, create the bigger numbers in my own business. But then I
Mm.
actually closed my business down in 2020 for about 8 months. I took a job during COVID. Um, because COVID hit and I had a crossroads, if you like, we'd just moved state. My husband's band was going on a world tour and it was
Mm.
cancelled,
Wow.
completely cancelled.
Yeah.
I refunded 80K in a day on my last mastermind,
Yeah.
due to people needing to homeschool and circumstances changing. And I was very much told then, you need to hold people to their contracts. You need to tell people that, be the example that they can do this anyway, even in difficult times. And I had to sit with myself and decide if that was true for me or if that was out of integrity for me. And because I hadn't started delivering to those people yet, I didn't want to start. I didn't want to start the program, and the mentorship relationship knowing they didn't want to be there
Mm.
because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
what had happened. And it
Yeah.
was very intense in Australia, borders closed. I know it was intense everywhere. Um,
Everyone, we're both in Sydney. So were you in Sydney then, though, as
I
well?
was in, so I was in Brisbane. I had just
Yeah.
moved
Okay.
to Brisbane 8 weeks prior.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And my best friend, who is American but lives in Melbourne, had
Mm.
called me and said, if you want to get back to New South Wales, you better go now because
Mm.
we're going to do what the states are going to do.
Yeah.
What they've done. So you better get back. So I got back, and then we were locked out of Queensland for 3 months, and we ended up
Yeah.
living with my parents, and it was, a disaster. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was great. Don't get me wrong. It was great
Yeah.
spending time with them. But yeah, um, well, it was. And it was a
Yeah.
blessing in disguise, actually. So,
Yeah.
anyway, I ended up taking a job, and there were a whole heap of things about my business before I decided to pause that weren't fully me, if you
Mhm.
will.
Yeah.
And I guess there was being an ex-actress, there's a performative element to business that I adore. Don't get me wrong. I
Mm.
can talk underwater. I love the camera. I love it all.
Yeah.
But I had very much, there was something, some sort of persona or mask or something for
Mm.
me that I felt I had to uphold in order to deserve the multi six figures,
Mm.
in order to, um,
I feel
and
like it's almost like there's a rite of passage in there. Like I'm
yeah,
never one to want to create a story for anyone else kind of thing. I'm like this, this might be my perception. It doesn't have to be a projection onto somebody else. However, there are some things, but
yeah,
um and I find when you go into business for yourself or throughout that journey of entrepreneurship or whatever it might be, there is that moment of the should, I should act a certain way, or I'm meant to be, professional, or I've got to be this, or I've got to be that, and that transition. You and I were speaking about identity before, and it's like that identity transition into being more unapologetically yourself, and that actually is the best expression for you, obviously, but also for your business, like,
100%.
rather than that mask.
Totally. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's like, well, how can I sell high ticket services with scruffy boho hair and, um,
Yeah.
like,
No judgment, no judgment. Like, yeah,
oh,
that's
I
fine.
mean, what can I say, everyone? It's 2:30 in the afternoon. This is what
Yeah.
Kelly hair does. But
Yes.
it's true
Yeah.
though, right?
Mm.
Um, and just feeling like that I could just be totally 100% me, and that my expertise were enough, and that whether I how I wanted to dress was enough, and um this notion of a brand being, who are you to them,
Mm.
rather than like, who are you as a human, and that there is this distinction there. And I believe that that's healthy to have a distinction between you, the human, and you, the brand. And
Yeah.
you don't have to share everything, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Agree.
but if the brand you're building feels like a heavy weight instead of an outlet for you, ugh. And again,
Yeah.
I say all of this. I didn't even know we were going to talk about this, right? And I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I have so many caveats and nuances to what I'm saying,
I'll
but
just sit here. You go. You've got this.
I'm just going to talk to myself in front of Skye.
Yes,
No,
fine.
this is
Yeah.
not by you. But
Yeah.
seriously, though,
Yeah.
like,
I've spent my life obsessed with the strategy and energetics of seven-figure business. I've literally traveled the world trying to crack the code. And what I found is that when you couple the pursuit of making massive amounts of money with the strategy and science of success, plus having a desire for significant impact and contribution, magic happens. That's why I created a free 21-day next level vortex money mission magic. Hell yes to that. This 21-day quantum business challenge is here to shift you into new timelines and realities. 21 days to quantum shift your impact, business, and your bank account. These carefully crafted and channeled tools are the exact things I've used to create a life beyond my wildest dreams, and I'm not done yet. If you're ready for incredible transformation now in all areas of your life, more money and financial freedom, freedom of time, freedom of lifestyle, freedom of choice, better, more connected relationships, greater levels of health, and simply calling in more magic into every single day, then these 21 days are going to blow your mind. 21 days of powerful universal, behavioral, and strategic tools to quantum shift your internal state so that you start to see massive changes in your external reality, bringing the metaphysical into the physical. Join the challenge now and get ready for the most powerful 21-day expansion to quantum shift your impact, business, bank account, and your life.
Cosmic Money, the podcast, the strategy and energetics of seven-figure business.
building a brand is a massive learning curve, and learning curves are uncomfortable AF. And so just because it's feeling heavy and uncomfortable doesn't mean what you're building isn't true and right either. But it's also easy to get to a place where it's heavy, a bit clunky, and maybe a little bit too perfect in the not you ways, or maybe a little bit not you enough in certain ways. And I think it really is that place where business meets art, where artistic expression meets effective marketing. And what is that line? And that's certainly something that I've been speaking about a lot with my mastermind people today. Actually, we did a high conversion copy training, and we're speaking about how like high conversion copy is probably one of the least artistic elements of a clear message, right? Where because you've got to speak to your person about what they care about, and
it can feel clunky and formulaic,
it
and
can.
it's powerful at the same time. And so it's this balance between, like, because I know working with my clients as well, it breaks their brain sometimes, and they're sitting there and it's like, oh my gosh, and all the rest of it. And it's like, as you said, yes, and it's powerful, and it's transformative, and it's connective. And, that's our job as the storyteller and the connector.
Yeah, totally.
I love as well that so I told you likenesses. So I came from that world of acting, and 20 years of whatever on stage, on camera, like all the different bits and pieces. From the moment I could walk, I think I was doing two things. I was in martial arts from the moment I could walk, because my dad was a martial arts instructor, and I was on stages because my mum was an opera singer. And so these were the things, like as soon as I could breathe and move and whatever, I was doing and did it for 20, 30 years. And I always appreciated, which I think you would understand, I always appreciated the skill set that it was able to give me for the purposes of business. And I love business, and I love everything that I do now. And I still can look back at that formative stuff that still really comes from being that presenter, or being the entertainer, or being, just relaxed, or whatever it might be, that obviously, you've come with yourself and then been able to help support your clients with too.
Yeah, totally. And I think one piece of that actually is the ability, with the acting part, especially
Yeah.
the performance part, is the ability to put yourself in the shoes and the skin of your client and to see the world through their eyes, to see their situation through their eyes, and to see what's important to them, like what are those high value problems or creations that they are focused on,
Mm.
and deeply understand that it's not the same thing that you, the expert, are caring about or seeing, and that to speak their language to a degree through your message and through being clear is an act of compassion. It's not like filtering yourself, or you don't need to filter yourself, but you do need to deeply understand who you're serving. And
Yeah.
the more markets you serve, the more important that is. The more ideal people you have in your world, the better you have to know each of them if you're going to communicate with each of them effectively. And I feel like that ability to slip into, or kind of shapeshift into somebody else's situation, somebody else's desires, their pains, their priorities, and to really feel into, okay, who are they, and embody that to a degree, is so useful for me
Mm.
still today when I'm
Yes.
reading clients' copy, when I'm looking at their videos, when we're talking about what is it that they really want to buy, as opposed to what is it that you want to sell them.
Yeah. Because they're very different things, and people don't they don't understand that is actually very different, those two pieces, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually
Yeah,
just
yeah,
wrote
yeah.
a post about this today, actually. How,
We did it.
like
Like,
one
yeah,
of one
let's
of
go
the
check it out.
problems, yeah, one
Yeah.
of the problems is that what you want to deliver is not always what your person wants to buy. And
Mm.
and vice versa. What they want to buy is not always what you're interested in delivering. So how
Yeah.
do we bridge that gap so that porque no los dos, you get to, have
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think the work becomes so much more rewarding, especially when you find your people.
Yes, yeah. You actually, the other day, as I was, wandering around social media, I spotted the beginning of a story of yours where you were talking. I was speaking into, what's the saying? Give me 1 second while my brain hemorrhages. Sell them what they want, give them what they need. And I started to watch your there we go, hello. And we're back. Thanks, Riverside. um where you spoke into sell them what they want, then give them what they need. And I started to watch your interesting take on that, and I was like, yes, because there was depth and layer to that, because it is actually a saying I say to my clients. And I loved the extension of what you put there, because I think my intentionality is everything you spoke to. And I don't know, I always communicate that. So share with us what you were speaking about.
Oftentimes, if you sell someone what they want and then you give them what they need, those are often two very different things. And
Yeah.
so it can feel like a bait and switch to your client, who's like, hang on a minute, you promised me this and amazing results here and all the things I care about in your marketing, and now I've paid you and now you're giving me this. It's not,
Mm,
and it doesn't feel congruent, it doesn't feel honest, it doesn't feel good
yeah.
to the buyer, because their expectations were this and they got that, right?
Yeah.
So instead, the reframe that I suggest is sell them what they want and then give them what they want and what they need.
Yeah.
And because the truth is, they're never going to know they needed it until they have it, and they're never going to have it until they come in on the promise of what they want.
Yeah.
And if you deliver them what they want and they're so happy there, and you deliver what they need, it's like, that's when you get those kind of
Mm,
results and testimonials where, the client might be like, well, I made multiple six figures, but that wasn't even the best part. The best part was I stopped
yeah.
stressing, I got good night's sleep, I had so much fun, my relationships are better, I feel like my real self, right? And that may well be what you knew they needed. And I certainly do a lot of that work with my seven-figure entrepreneurs, whereby but I'm not necessarily selling them lifestyle design, right? Even though that's a big component of what we're doing. What I'm selling them is the capacity to uncap their growth, because at the moment they are the bottleneck, they are the cap, and
Yep.
it's torture. It's torture being the cap
Mm.
in a multi seven-figure empire, being the bottleneck. Um, so yeah, I think we sell them. Oh, hello.
Oh, that's odd. Why did that just pop up?
No,
That will be on the YouTube, everyone. You'll just have to go to our YouTube channel and check out what just popped up on the screen. So
nice.
thank you, universe.
I think that's AI. Yeah, it will be.
Yes.
Yeah, give them what they want as well as what they need.
I would implore anyone that is listening to this or watching, like literally just rewind that last 3 minutes and listen to it again, because it sounds so simple. And yet it's, again, like just another powerful reframe to be like, oh, okay, yes, give them, sell them what they want, give them what they want, and layer on top of, what they need. And so I think that is such an important part that people can take away from today as well. Absolutely. So you bring up another amazing point, and I knew from the beginning of this podcast I wanted to ask you this question. It's such a don't mind us business coaches for a second, everyone, having a bit of a chat here. So I feel as if the marketplace doesn't always realize that we do have different problems and challenges that show up, within those financial spectrums, let's say. So for me, I always communicate it as like 0 to 15K months, 15 to 30, 30 to kind of 50, and then, looking for the $84,000 months, which equals your $1 million year. And so for you, you've got your 0 to 6 figures, you've got your six figures to multi, and then you've got the 7 and beyond. What are you finding are some of the biggest challenges at each of those levels? Because, our listeners are at varied levels anyway. And so they can actually start keeping an eye out for some of these things that are coming up. And to also, I think, have hope that it does change and shift. I feel like there's a saying around that, like, what is it? Each new level has a new devil. I don't know that it's that bad. However, new
Totally.
challenges.
I think in some ways it is a new devil, and in some ways it's the same devil in a different way. Because and we were speaking about identity earlier. I think the same kind of identity patterns come up again and again at each level, or can do. They just show up as different symptoms. So for example, in the 0 to 6 figure, it may be about over servicing and undercharging, right? And then you might move through that and might be making 6 figures or even multi 6 figures. But then it's about, well, how do I scale and give my leveraged people, the people in my group programs and my masterminds, how do I give them everything I want to give them, even though it's in a leveraged space? And even though I have great boundaries, and even though, like, here's the scope of work, and sometimes feeling over responsible for people's results at that level, wanting everyone at every level in every program to have the same kind of pacing and to get the same results in the same time frame, so that we have that confirmation that, yes, I'm bringing everyone with me and everyone's okay and I'm allowed to do this, right? And then at the 7-figure level plus, that may actually look like taking over responsibility for your team, and everything that's on your team's plate that's supposed to be taken off your plate actually feels like is still on your plate, but your team member is on your plate as well. Right? So instead of this like increased sense of freedom and spaciousness, it's like the more people get involved, the heavier it gets, the harder it is, the more responsibility there is, not only in the leadership, but then this kind of subtle micromanaging that can happen at that level. And it's not because you don't trust your people, it's because you care about them so much. So I would say there's an example of an identity piece. It's the same sort of core identity piece where a lot of loving, caring, heart-centered entrepreneurs, especially women who are sensitive, intuitive, empathic, went into business with a mission focus, rather than a purely income focus. I will see that sort of those sorts of patterns play out in the different stages of business because of the identity of the leader. So that's one example. A strategic
Yeah.
example would be the money channels piece that we
Yeah.
spoke about earlier.
Yes, I was about to ask about that. Yeah.
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 And that is
Yeah.
like, do you have money channels set up in your business so that it's really easy for people to pay you? Which sounds so
Mm.
simple,
Yeah. And
and
yet.
but yeah, yet.
Yes.
Um, it what that looks like is slightly different depending on your level as well. So, recently I was doing a whole bunch of profile reviews in my free group of saying, like, I should be able to look at your profile and know who you serve, what you can do for me, and how to take the next step. And my mind should be significantly blown enough to want to take that next step, basically to
Yeah.
go from being eyeballs on your profile to being a genuine lead for you. Um,
Mm.
that would be one way to look at money channels at the 0 to 6 figure level, whereas 6 figures, plus, and this is one of the reasons why I kind of look at 6 figures plus rather than the 15K mark, is because I find, and it does vary, of course, depending on business model, etc.
Mm.
But around that point ish, we need to start looking at the ecosystem of the
Yeah.
business rather than just as a service exchange for currency, as opposed to, do you have the ecosystem in your business built in to service more people, to handle leverage, to have lots of different price points? Is your buyer's journey beautifully mapped out? You can be a lot messier with a lot of those things up to the 6 figure mark, and then if you want to scale to multi, we need to clean those things up and
Mm.
really create those channels so that they can flow independently of you being on all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, around that point is where that becomes really important. And then when you're scaling beyond, the money channels usually operate more in the back end of the business. Often it's to do with automations and on sells and upsells and downsells
Mm.
and things like that. But again, it still comes back to the ecosystem of the business and the offerings, and
Yeah.
we still go back to core principles and foundations around, like, is this your ideal buyer? Do you want to reposition the business before we go fine tuning all of these automations and that sort of thing? So what
Yeah.
that looks like can change quite a lot. Some businesses need to reposition themselves in the marketplace, and by that I just mean serve different people to the people they're serving now,
Mm.
so that they can command higher revenue with more ease to the CEO in a way that's more conducive to the mission, and then scale downward again. So it's not that
Yes.
they necessarily don't serve the people at the lower price points anymore. It's just they have higher collateral, higher revenue, more collateral to serve those other markets. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love what you say about ecosystems. My second business, because we have three, so my second business is a virtual assistant agency, and we created the virtual assistant agency like off the back of knowing how much our clients needed that help and support to be able to transition and have that bridge from being, I guess, me centric, where it's my business and I'm wearing all the hats and doing all the things, to that place of being able to actually create like a really beautiful team dynamic, step into leadership, create that the ecosystem and things along those lines. And we do that earlier, because I truly believe as well that the best way to leverage, scale and grow is through team and time and, all those pieces. And it's interesting, this week I've been having a lot of those conversations with people that, making that leap into leverage, into scalability, into, relinquishing some of the control, and being able to set up not a dictatorship, but actually an ecosystem. We always say everybody has a seat at the round table. And I know that I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for, my team who hold me together and keep me sane as well. And so, I find that that perspective, you know, that for me, the business is here for all of us, like, you know, and not just now clients even, but like future clients who I don't even know their name yet, you know, but require me to be and step into whatever identity I need to be in the now, to be able to call them in, you know, into the future and stuff like that as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's also about the seasons and the chapters of your life. And
Yes.
if the business is set up for your definition of success and freedom. And for some CEOs and entrepreneurs, that actually looks like the opposite. It looks like reducing overheads, reducing team,
Yeah.
reducing all of those things so that the bottom
Yes.
line goes up and they have less moving parts. It's a simpler
Yeah.
business model, right?
Yeah.
And it's not so much about, well, bigger is always better, bigger is always best. It's really about, well, what serves you and your definition of success in this phase of your life,
That's a great
I
question
think
then,
that's
really. Let
really
me ask you
important.
that. What serves you presently? What's your definition of success moving into this next phase of your life?
Ah, beautiful. Okay. So, well, my son is now 9, nearly 10, which I can't
Yeah.
believe.
Mm.
And for the last 3.5 years or so, I've really been enjoying a very chilled, kind of peaceful vibe. What I
Nice.
called my lazy, sexy money era after a lot
Yeah.
of hard work and, you know, um, overcoming obstacles and that sort of thing. I really decided that I was going to prioritize my peace and focus on high level service and yeah, just let it be really easy for a time. And I'm really happy that I did that because now I'm more interested in moving into a phase where I have these 3 different areas that I love to work in, and I'm creating ecosystems, speaking of which,
Yeah.
for each. And so for my 0 to 6 figure entrepreneurs, I have an amazing program coming up called Cash Magnet,
Yeah. Amazing.
which I just
Perfect. Perfect.
thought it was such a fun name, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because essentially, if you set your business up to be one, not only will it be a cash magnet, but it will be a client and service magnet as well, obviously, that reciprocal energy. But
Yes.
I find that it can be quite overwhelming and easy to overcomplicate it at that stage. And the more we can simplify it, the more fun we can make it, then the more successful you're going to be. And it's funny, like when I started in 2016, I had no idea what the statistics were in terms of what percentage of people make 6 figures. I just
Mm.
assumed that I would,
Yeah.
which
Yes.
sounds so insanely naive, I know. But I was like, one, I have no choice, so I have to. And two, like, why not me? So I
Mm.
did. And
Yeah.
now that I hear, like, all the statistics and whatever, I'm like, oh, and all of the new information we have about being neurodivergent and that sort of thing, because I
Mm.
most
Yeah.
definitely have ADHD, in case you couldn't tell.
Yes, that was actually, it's so funny. That was going to be my next question, like
Really?
because you mentioned it earlier, and I was like, I wonder if we'll swing back to that because it is a really interesting, I guess, topic at the moment, you know, and I joke about it almost being a bit of a prerequisite for entrepreneurship or something. And even recently myself, and I can't remember if I mentioned this on my podcast yet. It's quite funny, quite funny. So I imagine that I am dyslexic in some way. Like that just would not surprise me. I cannot spell. I've never been able to, and it's not an intelligence piece by any means. It's just like the pattern recognition of it or something. And so I recently sat a dyslexia test. And so I sat there and I was like, all right, I'll do the dyslexia test. And it was like, yeah, look, you probably are. And I was like, all right, whatever. Like, you know, I was curious, but it doesn't change anything. And I just did my Australian tour and had about 4 different people come up to me at my event and say, are you ADD? Like, do you have ADHD or something like that? And I thought, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't have expected that. I haven't really thought about it. It's not, it doesn't change anything in existence. But I thought I'd sit down and do an ADD test as well. Because I thought, all right, well, I did the dyslexia one and they can come hand in hand. So let's do the test. I got 4 questions into 70 and then gave up and was like, I'm not fucking doing this. It's taking too long. And I was like, it took me probably 30 seconds before I went, oh, okay, I think you've just gotten your answer. Like, because I was like, screw it, 4 questions is already too much. I'm done. Like, yeah. So how have you found, did you say ADD, ADHD, like, yeah, in your existence, your life, and has it been a prerequisite for entrepreneurship? And is it a superpower for you? How does it show up?
It shows up as a really mixed bag. I think the hyper
Yeah.
focus piece, absolutely.
Yeah.
I only really found out a couple of years ago, and then I was like, oh, duh, because I was misdiagnosed as
That
a
makes sense.
teen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, oh, now lots of things make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can serve in terms of the hyper focus. I'd say, though, been in business for 9 years, and I've probably run inside of that business maybe 5 different businesses, but like
Yes.
started, created, diversified, pivoted, um, and so I love it because I can follow my flow and my creative nature.
Mm,
And I think that that really serves me. I get paid
yeah.
beautifully for it. I get to serve people at every stage and every evolution. And that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I do sometimes go, if I wasn't neurodivergent, I probably would be an 8-figure entrepreneur by now, or
Yeah.
10-figure or something,
Yeah.
like, because
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
it's the single point of focus over an extended period of time, as opposed to I want to do all the things. And
Yeah.
like there are points in business where it's not fun. There's no dopamine for you.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
there's
It's
no
just called
dopamine.
Thursday or something. Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't really know. I think had I known earlier,
Mm.
things would have gone differently, and I probably would
Mm.
have responded differently. Whereas now I just kind of roll with it.
And that's where I landed with it too. I sort of went, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not sure if I am or I'm not, to be honest. And they were some of the things that we were questioning. Like, my partner and I were sitting there going, but I'm really focused. Like, I'm really focused, and I can sit there and I can do the things and, like, and high performing and all the rest of it. But also, I had to learn within my own businesses too over the years, where to channel that need for creation energy, what to basically blow up in some way or tear apart, like, because I like variety, and where not to do that, and where you actually, need safety and security and future proofing and stability and, all of those things. And I think I was very lucky in my business journey to, come across that recognition within myself and sort of go, okay, if I start to get that need, know where to actually channel that and where, not to, basically, like, yeah.
Totally, yeah. So I
Mm.
think now that I've settled on my 3 markets and I'm just letting
Yeah.
myself have them all, rather than kind of ping-ponging between them, and
Yeah.
spending 6 months to 12 months in one, and then kind of, and people being
Yeah.
like, what are you doing now? Who are you now?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Who are you serving? Yeah.
yeah, who are you serving? And so now I feel like I can really build,
Yeah.
which is exciting for me. And exactly what that looks like, well, I think I'll have I I love to be prolific. I love teaching, so I will no doubt always, hopefully, now have a lower cost offering on the go for those who are either
Yeah.
newer to the game or who just don't know me very well and want to explore a particular aspect of business together. Um,
Mm.
and then there'll be a higher level of connection through a mastermind of some kind, and then I'll still have my one-on-one services. But I'm excited to build an ecosystem of goodies for people to be
Yeah.
able to access and learn from independently of me on their own time, as well
Mm.
as to build those beautiful communities of different entrepreneurs at different stages. Because
Yeah.
I feel it's important that there's a space where we can all come together as well, because really, even if you're making whatever you're making this minute, I don't know, like I almost see I almost see your income as, or the business's income as one of maybe 13 really important factors to determine whether people are going
Yeah.
to connect with each other or not. Um, and it's
Mm.
certainly not the only defining factor. So I love the melting pot that is my free group Business Alchemy Network, where we have everyone at every income stage there. Um,
Yeah.
and that coming back to core foundations as well, because sure, to get to six figures, those core foundations are going to serve you, but guess what, to scale, you're going to want to go back to those and refine and go deeper and
Yeah.
leverage everything you've learned, and maybe make some tough calls and evolve and grow from there. And then certainly if you're moving into seven figure plus empire land, by then you're probably going to be narrowing down even more. So it's exciting.
Mm. Now,
Yeah.
speak to us about something you and I were talking about before as well. Was the strategy and the energetics. Obviously, everything that Cosmic Money, podcast is about is I describe it. I love your analogy, and you're going to tell us your analogy in a second. My analogy has always been that it's like a pendulum, because I've found that in my experience and my own journey over the years, that's how it's felt to me. I've either swung the pendulum, far too deep into strategy, and I've gotten all fucking masculine and all up in the action, and all the different bits and pieces. Or I've then gone, no more of that. And I swung my pendulum the other way, and I'm deep in the energetics and, wishing and willing things just to, fly in the window and hit me in the face or something. And whereas now I've come to this equilibrium of the two, although, I'm very forwards, I always say to people that I know that my pendulum swings, a little bit more into the strategic realm. That, strategy for me is like the default. And it's kind of a 60, a 60-40. I'm 60% strategy and probably 40%, the energetic side. Like, I don't think it's even, but I do straddle both of those realms. So tell us about your own experiences with that.
Yeah, look, I definitely straddle both realms as well, and I have also done the pendulum swing for sure. There
Yeah.
was a period when I stepped out of employment where to do the strategy.
Gorgeous being. It is truly my honor to have you here joining me on this co-created adventure through the strategy and energetics of seven-figure business. However it is that you landed here, whether we know each other personally or professionally, whether a friend shared this podcast with you as they thought you might get something out of it, or whether you stumbled across me by sheer accident or divine intervention, I want to thank you for being here, and I want to ask you a little favor. It is my joy to do what it is that I do every single day. And so if you have received anything here, a piece of magic, a strategy, a mindset shift, something that has transformed you in some way, I ask that you share this podcast with others so that together we can transform the world for the better. One business, one human, one frequency, and one podcast at a time. Cosmic Money, the podcast. The strategy and energetics of seven-figure business.
I thought I'd take a break from the strategy. So I swung hardcore into sidereal astrology, yoga coaching,
Yeah.
identity work, sort of Joe Dispenza style,
Cool.
and a whole heap of working with intuition and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. And then I swung heavily back into strategy, and certainly I've lived the pendulum swing as well. Now I like to think of it as left foot, right foot. Left foot energetics, right foot strategy. The best way to get somewhere is to walk and put one foot in front of the other and be aware of both as you move forward,
Mhm.
not in a one. Because for some people, and I do believe it depends on who you are as well and where you're at in your journey. Absolutely, there may be a period of time, a prolonged period of time, where a heavy strategy focus is going to be the thing that moves the needle forward the most by far. And
Yeah.
you actually want it to be like 80-20. And then there may
Yeah.
be a period of time where, like, the cap, if you like, or the thing that is standing between you and your next level of income is an identity transformation. And that may well require 80% focus on energy, right? So
Yeah.
I think that pendulum swing in the beginning when you're newer to entrepreneurship is part of the personal development journey that is entrepreneurship. And then I think the more experienced you get at it, regardless of what you're earning potentially, it's more like, have you been holding on to that pendulum, doing the work? Then we can kind
Yeah.
of get to a place where it's more like an infinity loop, that one side feeds the other, feeds the other. It's more like a
Yeah.
walk or a dance with a left foot and a right foot. And knowing that, hopping somewhere is going to be much harder than walking. And that one side really does feed and nurture the other. And
So let me ask a cheeky, I was going to say, let me ask a cheeky question then. Do you default? Do you have a default? Which way do you swing in your,
yeah.
like, in a moment or something? Like, yeah.
So if there's fear for me, I will
Mm.
default to strategy. Tell me how.
Ah,
Tell me how to
interesting.
do it.
Distinction. Love
What
that.
should I
Yeah.
do? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and then I won't need to be afraid anymore.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of my thing.
Mm.
And then if I am doing the do and I'm not feeling amazing about it, or it's not flowing, then it will be like, oh, there's something I don't want to look at over there. There's something I don't want to feel over there.
Yeah.
I think that tends to be my default. As a kid, I was a high achieving perfectionist,
Mm.
would try and get A plus plus on every assignment and would just do it
Mm.
regardless of how I felt, right? Would push through.
Yeah.
That was my MO, to achieve the thing, and then you can feel. That was kind of my vibe.
Mm.
But then I'm also a very emotionally driven person. So it was kind of like a push, 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 collapse kind of pattern. So now that I'm aware of that, it's left foot, right foot. It's like, oh, I'm scared of this. Let's look at that. Because I do believe it's important now to acknowledge that, like a base level of safety is our responsibility. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I even really answered your question. I think the default is strategy. If there's a lot of fear, I'll want to check the strategy, and then I'll be like, oh, hang on, this is something
Yeah.
I don't want to feel, and then I'll go do
I've
it.
I've said before, I've had to find that distinction. Actually, oh my God, I have a million things to say. Something I was going to say before about the acting piece as well, when you were talking about that, is not only it gives us the ability to be able to step ourselves into somebody else, but I found it helped me know myself more too. And so, like, I am constantly, I was going to say diagnosing, lol, that'll do. We'll just go with it, like myself, and feeling into something and being like, what does that mean? And being the observer, and all these different pieces. And so, in relation to this, my distinction for action, because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm being so rah rah masculine, and I'm wronging myself, for also what I think is part of the best bits of me, the high achiever, or the just action focused solution, wanting to get out there, all those things. And I realized, similarly to what you said, that there was a distinction, that was the action taker, who is the best parts of me, who is doing it out of love and strive and motivation and all of that. And then there was the frantic child, and the frantic child was the one actioning out of an anxiety or a need to, out of some sort of not okayism. And when I had that distinction and was able to go, oh my gosh, there's actually these two portions to it. It isn't one in the same. I was able to stop wronging what I consider the best bits of me, and also could then more greatly feel into when I was actioning out of that fear, or I was actioning out of something that was not okay. And I was like, actually there that is, interesting, and could become a greater observer of myself, because it is like we it's hard to know another, and it's hard to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, as we know through acting, if you don't even know yourself, if you don't understand what makes you tick, and what your own patterns are and things like that. Like, actually, that's part of the most important work, I find.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
And being able to lead yourself through that and not make yourself wrong for having
Yes.
those emotional states or fears or what have you, and then compound the fear with another feeling about the fear,
Yes. Yeah.
and instead actually be able to hold yourself, and to have there be that part of you that is bigger than the feeling, be
Yeah.
present with you, that part of you that is feeling, and to start to bring that internal safety back to what's happening.
Mm.
Um,
I always say if there's one thing I could take away from humanity and just like remove, I always say it's like that additional 10%. So it's the like wronging ourselves or the fear on the fear for having the fear to begin with, or, you know, all of that kind of thing. It's like if I could just remove the 10%, because it's one thing to just be in it and having an experience and that be okay, you know, to be having an experience
mm.
without then layering, you know, all the different pieces on top that then have people feel more stuck and perpetuate, you know, these patterns and things along those lines.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
I think about the times where, if I was stuck in a loop in my own business or stuck at a level, or if things went backwards, and it was always because I couldn't accept where I was at. I was beating myself up for where I was at. I was beating myself
Mm.
up for what is. And so I couldn't move beyond it because I was in denial of what is, or like
Mm.
trying to not be here creates more energy of wanting to not be here. It's like
Mm.
doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So you can, if you're in that space, you can strategize till the cows come home of
Mm.
all of the ways you could get out of this situation, but it's
Yeah.
not going to change. So
Yeah.
that's where I do think it's energy first, physical second. If you're in a
Yeah.
kind of state or a loop or you've created evidence for yourself that, oh, this doesn't go well for me. And so, yeah, then there's evidence that proves that. And then
Yeah.
I would say then energetics first would be super valuable. But if you're feeling energetically good and aligned and open and you know open to the possibilities and like feeling like you can create what you want when you want and have that be successful, but it's not happening, chances are there's a strategy piece missing. It's like trying to do a puzzle with missing pieces. It doesn't really
Yeah.
work.
Now, I want to talk to you about one more piece today before we escape, which is you and I were both recently, I think, having a bit of a parallel experience with this entire high ticket, low ticket, you know, wrong, right, high integrity, low integrity, all of these different pieces. And I'd love for you to speak into that. Again, for our listeners, I have every intention of doing a podcast based on that alone. It'll probably be the next one. And so, yeah, I would love to get your thoughts, your takes, because I know you have them.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so in terms of the high ticket, low ticket, so we did have a bit of a parallel experience, for sure. And there was at one point you made a post, and I was like, oh my God, I hope Skye didn't see my post and think I was like talking about her, which never happens to me actually. I tend not to worry about those things. Everyone's a grown
Yes,
up, and
yes,
we can all handle different perspectives. But the
yes.
timing of my post and
Yes,
your
the
post,
timing.
whoa. And
Yeah. So it
um,
must have been in the collective. I said that to you as well because I was like, it's so interesting. You're having these conversations and I'm having these like conversations as well or whatever. I was like, clearly something in the collective at that
yeah,
time. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think what I was speaking about was like, don't charge low ticket as an apology for what your industry has done. And the reason
Mm.
I phrased it that way was because there was a lot of talk that I had read
Yeah.
about how the coaching industry has a lot to answer for, and people have
Mm.
made investments and then felt that they weren't, they didn't get ROI, or they weren't sound investments, or they had buyer's remorse, and we as a collective have a responsibility now to shift how we price,
Mm.
as though it was somehow a collective thing, as though somehow we as an industry price as a collective, when
Mm.
and that high ticket equals low integrity, and that low ticket equals higher integrity
Yeah.
because it's more accessible. And it's just simply not true. Like,
Yeah.
you price for your buyer. If you're
Mm.
charging low ticket to someone who is looking for a high ticket investment, they're not going to want what you're selling them at low ticket, because what they're looking for is the best, the best. They want the best
Mm.
that they can afford. They want the best, from their perspective, the best experience possible. They want the best outcome possible. They are looking for a particular kind of experience, and they want to invest to a certain level to have that experience, and to experience those results or outcomes of that work. And so it's just about matching people with what they want to buy, rather than, and how much they want to pay for that experience and outcome and journey, rather than it is about, well, one's better and one's worse, because it depends on who you're asking. It depends on who the buyer is, whether one is better or worse. Some people, when they're looking at prices, will always go for like the second most expensive, because they don't want to pay the most, but they want to get the best that they think is reasonable, right? Whereas someone else will always look for the cheapest one, because that's just how they're wired. They want to invest as little as possible and get as much in return. There are different buyer types. And then that's within the same market. There are those different buyer types. Then when you look at the different markets that are involved in the coaching industry, everything from health and fitness and wellness and body transformation, all the way through to business and money and wealth management, and like, you name it, all the way through to
spiritual relationship, it's a huge spectrum these days.
huge. And everyone has a different buyer in mind. Everyone has a different person that they're speaking to. And so as long as your price is pitched perfectly for them and for you, and it feels amazing in your body, and it feels like both generous and woohoo, like in your body, then you're on track. And it's like, someone charging more than they're comfortable charging is not going to go well. Similarly, someone charging less just because they think they should, or they're afraid of judgment, or to me all of those things only happen when you're not clear on who you're serving, because the person you're serving wants to pay at a certain level. So in terms of integrity and congruence, it's really about those things. What's in integrity for you in terms of what you're offering, and the sort of results that become available for your particular buyer. And then how much do they value that, and is that a match? That's all it is.
Yeah. I love how, again, the alignment there and the simplicity of it, and also, we've been big this year speaking into this, absolutely, and because I think it is important to that it isn't coming from that place of apology, where it is like actually within the alignment and within service, and and aligned with the perfect person for, the perfect deal and offer, really. So let me ask you one more thing as part of our podcast today, which I ask all of our guests in terms of the strategy and energetics of seven-figure business. What is the biggest piece of advice that you could possibly give our listeners that they could go out there and, take today?
Oh my gosh, it's going to sound like the biggest cliche. But it's so true. Just do the thing that scares you the most. Just do it. Like, just get it done. Get to the other side of the thing that scares you the most. Because if it goes really well, you're changed. And even if it doesn't go well, the learning you receive from that is so valuable and so golden, and you'll learn that even though it wasn't great, you didn't die. And so I just feel like courage is the thing that collapses time more than anything. We can either leverage linear time, or I believe the way we hop timelines is through massive courage. And I mean that in its original sense, like massive heart, massive connection to the thing that's bigger than you, massive connection to that sense of your purpose and your potential, massive connection to that feeling you get in your body when you're doing the thing you came here to do, and to just really go all in on that, and to get the support that you need in order to do it, to move through it, and to be willing to do it badly as well, so that then like you get over the first time of that thing that scares you the most, whatever that is right now. And I think that's the case whether you've been in business for decades and now you're a 7-figure entrepreneur and you're like, oh, it's just all like, yeah, it's all the same, all the same. There's still something you'll find something that scares the shit out of you and do it. You know, because that's how we keep growing, and that's how we stay alive with it. And I do think there's a lot to be said about our relationship with fear determining how this goes.
I love that. And it's so interesting you say cliche when really, you know, I don't think a single one of our other guests has made that as a suggestion. And so it is so amazing and unique and powerful. And I fully wholeheartedly agree. And as our listeners know, like the saying that changed my life was literally our lives will only expand in proportion to how much courage we are willing to have, you know? And so for me, like existence from that day on was 100% about courage and always choosing courage in, you know, every single moment that it was available to me. So
that's
thank you Victoria. It is so amazing to finally connect with you and to be here and to, you know, hear so much about your beautiful experience and how you're out there affecting the world. Tell us about your I think you said you have a community group. How can people reach out and get in contact with you if they'd like to connect?
So I have a Facebook group called the Business Alchemy Network. You can feel free to join us there. I think that's probably the easiest way to find me. And yeah, our community is growing now, and it's full of entrepreneurs who are at all levels of business in different stages. But what we have in common is it's called Business Alchemy because really the focus is on taking what we've got and creating gold with it, turning it into something magical, much more valuable, both for us and for our clients and our community. And it's a network because I really want it to be a genuine network of entrepreneurs who are there for each other, who interact with each other. And so there's quite a bit happening in that space. So feel free to join us there.
Amazing. Look, thank you again for being here. I've really appreciated it and the chat and everything. And please reach out to Victoria. We will put all of her links below and in all of the places. And I look forward to doing this again sometime.
Yes, please. I'm going to come to that high ticket conversation, I reckon.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, we'll draw you back in. I'll get a panel of people.
Amazing.
Yeah, perfect.
So good.
Thank you so much, lovely. And we'll see you in the next episode.
See you later.
Cosmic Money, the podcast, the strategy and energetics of 7-figure business.